Makes me feel cool.
I hope it's recording. Oh, yes, it is. Okay. Hi, guys. Welcome back
Hey.
to my channel. Welcome to 3 Degrees of Love Divination. It is so nice to have all of you here today with me for my hashtag Bell Let's Talk Day group discussion that I'm now running for the 4th time this year. And I'm, as we were talking extensively, or rather my piggies were too, since, you guys have all been here and just been super excited for this. It's very meaningful in so many ways. And so it's I'm truly honored that you guys, have all, agreed to and wanting to join me on this discussion. Of course, this is not sponsored by Bell. And for those of you who aren't in Canada and don't really know, so Bell is our one of our largest phone companies, so cell phone,
Okay.
cable, internet, and all of that. And they host for mental health. They host the hashtag Bell Let's Talk, and every year there's a campaign going, to raise money to put towards programs and services for mental health. And it's been running for a long time. And what inspired me to start doing this was, of course, my own particular journey that I've had to endure. My chosen profession, and what I'm now confirming and learning has pretty much been my lifelong love song calling, if you will. So and it's led me down this amazing path, yet treacherous and nightmarish all at the same time, but has led me to present to be in company with all of you. And for that, I am truly, truly grateful. So thank you to everyone joining. So of course, I guess we'll start with top left, who's the only male here in our group.
Hi.
Hi.
Am I introducing myself? I'm Tom Benjamin.
Yes. And if you want to give a little bit background and and your experience and stuff like that.
So I'm a tarot reader and a trainer. I've been doing both of those since I was like 19, so only 25 years. And also have had my moments with struggling with mental health over my the whole life, really. And I think it wasn't until my 20s where I was sort of, and almost like the time I started learning tarot, where I was like, oh, these two things kind of go together. But then I started exploring like what there were things that weren't normal, right? Like things that weren't working correctly.
Yeah.
And Zoom user, I should have mentioned that to you earlier. If you wanted, you could have typed your name in, but I don't know if you can do it now. But Heather, and
Ooh.
please introduce yourself.
I just looked, I said, hey, my name is Zoom user. My name is Heather. I have a YouTube channel here on YouTube. I go by Indigo Jaguar. I've had multiple name changes, but I'm currently right now at Indigo Jaguar. I have gotten back into tarot within the last 3 to 4 years. Again, like with everybody during shutdown with COVID, and with everything that was going on in our political environment and stuff, and what was going around the world. A lot of like political tarot tubes started popping up, and I was watching shows for other readings, and it just got me really interested back again, because originally when I started in my 20s, I just turned 54 last month, so back in my 20s in the 90s, the tarot was still kind of relatively new. There weren't many books on the market, and they were always saying, well, to read tarot you have to read this way and this way only. And so this girl can't hold 78 card symbolism and meanings up and down and negative and positive and all that stuff. So I figured, this isn't going to go anywhere. But I always kept a couple decks, and I would pull cards for friends or myself or my mom at the time. And but for me, mental health, I really didn't know much about it, and they realized really that I did have it until basically, shit really hit the fan back in 2011,
Mm.
after a few years of having to do a major move after a real major betrayal on the part of a best friend of mine. So my fellow and I had to do an emergency move to New York, back to New York, and after a couple of years, I don't know what we are or not allowed to share, but I did have a moment where I attempted suicide. I got myself help. Um, I got into a hospital, and I finally got the help that I didn't know that I needed so badly. And my journey has been connected with peer support over the years. I had a bit of a relapse in 2018, but I have an amazing counselor that's been with me ever since. And I trust her with just about everything. And I'm at, I'm going through a bit of a stressful period right now myself with where I live and getting ready to relocate across country. So my mental health is just really well supported. And I check in with my providers and my supports and my YouTube channel, the tarot, like, Tom said, they go hand in hand. They really do. And I've just learned to be able to be very open and authentic about who I am, my diagnosis. Um, I was major depressive as well, anxiety, some PST from childhood trauma, and borderline personality disorder. So it's taken me a few years not no longer being ashamed, and again that stigma that we need to. It is slowly going. I've noticed. It's been over 10 years now since my initial diagnosis, and even though certain programs have been kind of pulled back financially from the government, at least it's more now open. People are talking about it more, and there's more of a positive. It's not like I don't say a death sentence. It's a kind of a, I know, dramatic way of saying it, but a lot of times people feel like, well, when I get diagnosis like that with mental health, my life is over. Because of the stigma. We don't want people to feel like that. You know, um, there's room for all of us, in this world, and I think the more we talk about it, and be kind of like a light and a support system. That's one of the things that I cherish with my channel, and I'm very proud to uphold it, is that when people come into my chats, it's a safe space. People know they can share, they can feel safe, and at any sniff of a comment or people, I don't tolerate any sort of bullying or it's, I want my place to be a safe space for others to, so I know I talked a little more than
No.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah, I'll save some for the rest of the discussion, but yeah, so I'm very honored to be here, and I appreciate being invited to have this discussion. So yeah,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much, Heather and Tom, for, like I said, for being here. It means the world to me. And of course, we have our lovely.
Ange. So my name's Ange. Here on YouTube, I have a channel called Roots and Waves. I've been on YouTube now for, what is it, 3 or 4 years, something like that. And yeah, so I do create content. But in terms of mental health, I'm
Have to
really
toot your own horn or anything.
Do it
yeah,
away, girl.
I do. I do enjoy YouTube. Actually, I really
I
do.
do
I
too.
enjoy creating content. I enjoy collabing, and I really enjoy the connection between specifically psychology and tarot. That is where I thrive, and I love helping others by reading for them and empowering others. But I also use the tarot for myself, for self-reflection and that sort of thing. So, in terms of mental health, it's sort of in terms of the diagnosis of a mental illness. I was just recently diagnosed this year, last year, I guess, in 2024. with major depression. And this is very new for me in terms of a diagnosis. When I look back, I could probably see how there should have been, like, I should have known the signs, but I didn't. Well, hang on, let me backtrack a little bit. So my background is medical field, right, for nursing. And so you would think, and this is sort of another assumption and a stigma that's kind of tied into what we're going to talk about, is like you would think like, well, you're a medical worker, shouldn't you know these things? It's like, yes, but of course I know about depression. Of course I know about other mental illnesses that people live with. I've studied it. I've supported many patients over the years with it, but it's very different when you are diagnosed with it yourself. It's a completely different lens, a completely different perspective. Talk about a hangman experience
Mm-hmm.
for sure. So yeah, so that's where I'm at right now with it. It's just something that now I just have to learn to live with. And I have it managed in specific ways with my doctor. I've chosen not to take medication, which is even more challenging to live with this situation. But it makes me, it's what I've chosen for myself and my doctor. Like we work hand in hand, of course. And so, I have a rigorous exercise routine. I'm very specific on my diet, and there's a whole bunch of therapy, if you will, that I have to do to ensure that I stay, um, um, as healthy as I can. But it's been very interesting, to say the least, in terms of learning so much more about myself, so much more about other
Yes.
people. And I know this is going to sound weird, but I'm almost grateful for the diagnosis. I mean, certainly I don't wish this upon anybody. It is not fun to live with. However, it has certainly given me a whole bunch more to work with in terms of empowering and helping others, because I have exited the medical field. I don't work in that line of work anymore, and I have shifted more to, I do professional tarot readings and support people in that capacity with energy healing. So this has really allowed me to see a whole different layer that I can tap into more deeply, because I actually have lived experience. But having said that, I recognize everybody's situation is completely individual. So I'm not sitting here saying like, oh, okay, I know how everybody feels with depression. That's not what I'm saying. But at least with a diagnosis now, I can be like, oh, okay, so that's what that was. That thing, there's a name for it now. And there's like tools that I can use to help myself. So yeah, like, it sounds weird, but I'm grateful for it. And I'm also grateful for the opportunity to talk about it, because even long before my diagnosis, I have always been a huge mental health advocate. I mean, even Alana, you've known me for years, you know that as well. I'm always wanting to talk about it, and I'm always wanting to challenge people and talk about the uncomfortable conversations, because I think it's in these uncomfortable conversations that we learn from each other, we grow, and we learn to become more acceptable of each other.
Yes.
It's no surprise when we look out into this big wide world of how many problems are out here. And I think that we can all agree that a lot of it stems to disconnection with each other, in terms of having that compassion, that understanding. And yeah, I do think it all begins with these types of conversations. So thank you so much, Alana, for hosting this. I appreciate it.
Yes.
Like I said, thank you all for being here and you joining me to be a part of this discussion. Because for the longest while, like feeling very alone with your situation, and not having anybody around you who really understands. And and with my situation being unique as it is, and living like a hermit, I'm very, and especially too, for I think a lot of people, going through COVID and everything, you remain really isolated. And then if you don't have the right, you're not, surrounded by the right people, or the people who you can relate to, you don't get to talk about these things that are running through your mind, right? And so, and then if you are a person who suffers from anxiety, you do suffer from major depression, which, both of those I've been medically diagnosed myself, and among other things. But like it's when your brain sort of functions in a particular way that isn't necessarily the norm, and and the way that you sort of relate to the world isn't necessarily, how do you get to really communicate? So,
Yes.
finding a group of like-minded individuals that I can talk to and bounce ideas off, and feel that I can share openly and not be judged, and have that sort of compassionate understanding that I know I'm known for giving, all the time, reciprocated, it
Mhm.
it means the world to me. And so thank you very, very much for agreeing to be vulnerable and to share and be
Mhm.
open, with yourselves too, and especially in such a public domain, right? Like, I mean, we're on the internet, right? Like, so
Hey.
many things that
Everybody.
go on the internet these days, right? So but being able to bring something, I feel is not only necessary, but is, I feel like is of some sort of substance that's helpful, instead
Yeah.
of just look at me, shaking my booty on the internet. Not no. Right? I mean, hey, some people could do it really good, and I'm not gonna judge because some it can be quite entertaining, but you know what I mean? Like, I'm just, there's enough of that out there and not enough of the educational stuff, right? So there needs, in everything in life, there needs to be that balance, right? So yeah, so so thank you. But as you guys, as everybody was like sharing and talking, and I remember there was I was it actually turned out it was actually on last year on Global Mental Health Day. I guess I took the deep dive into this rabbit hole of statistics. And of course, especially in regards to mental health. And so, just to share some with you, and then get your feedback on whether you've known some of this stuff, how do you feel hearing about it, and that kind of thing, and your thoughts. But so one thing I learned here is there's about, that I researched just by simple Google, 5 facts about mental health. Now, 1 in 5 Americans experience mental health concerns. This is, and this is as most recent as was posted. 1 in 6 young people experience a major depressive episode, with 1 in 20 have lived with a serious mental illness. 1 in 5 Canadians, as of 2020, suffer from depression, anxiety, or PTSD. And as of 2021, it went down to 1 in 4. There's 4 of us here.
Yeah.
We are all identifying
Yeah.
with some form of it, right? Okay, so and then in the UK, it's listed as 1 in 7. So let's talk about that, because there's more, but let's talk about that first, because that's already a lot, right? Like,
Yeah.
what what do you like? What are your first thoughts that come to your mind when you hear that?
Statistics definitely have their place, don't get me wrong, and that's also something I've studied in my career, obviously, with nursing. But like, I would tell you that those numbers are way higher than those statistics are are alluding to.
Yeah,
However, it's good to have metrics. I get it. I get
and
it.
have at least a baseline. But even at baseline, like
Right.
when I was researching this, even the baseline for me was like, whoa.
Right, right. It's staggering, and that's really the point that you're trying to make. Is like, wow, we really aren't alone out here. People are out here living with these conditions. you know, I think that just goes more to show you exactly what we were talking about before, how, you know, these types of conversations and letting people know that they aren't alone is very important, because there is a lot of shame attached to mental illness, a lot. And it's just, we just need to learn how to come together and talk about it more. And let's face it, there's people out here who they're not going to come on the, you know, public web and talk about their and talk about their situation.
Yeah,
Not everybody is called to do that, and
they can't.
no,
Hmm.
and I understand that and I respect that. But
Hmm.
you know, when they flip on like YouTube and they can see, you know, four individuals sharing their story, that definitely is empowering for them to be able to share theirs in their own way. Maybe not on the wide web, but maybe in their personal support groups, or maybe just journaling in their journal, whatever that looks like for them. But
Even
we all,
seeking out the professional
yeah,
assistance that they may need that, you
Hmm.
know, isn't there, or
right,
wanting to advocate for more
Advocate.
services to be
Hmm.
available.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And I
And that's
think
gonna look,
those. Oh, oh, I'm
no,
sorry, Ange.
no, go ahead. I was just gonna say it looks different in every country that you're in, but go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, you know, here in the States, I'm in the US. I think those numbers, you know, we probably would have similar numbers, and you know, those numbers are always a lot lower than they should be.
Yeah.
Especially when you know, being a part of support groups, taking groups through my provider. That's one of the things that, you know, helped me get through this, is having the support groups, the DBT groups for
Mhm.
mindfulness, and for, you know, people don't know what DBT, dialectical behavior therapy, and CBT, they help you with, you know, processing relationships and mindfulness and radical acceptance, all those kinds of things. And
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
when you see how many people come to those groups, and then when they come and talk, and then they share the people that they know, you just know that the numbers are going to be a lot higher, because again, like Ange said, people don't want to openly admit, because it could affect their jobs, it could affect their relationships,
Yeah.
it could affect, you know, the status. I mean, let's face it, social media now, everybody's so scrutinized. It's like being under that fine little lens that, you know, and people like to pick and dissect, and so something like that could, you know, even though there's much more open conversation than there used to be, it's still a lot harder for people to come forward
Mhm.
and talk about it, because there is still that heavy stigma. And if they would only, the social media, the news, things like that would just kind of let up and not put so much fear, you know, into, you know, mental health. I think there would be a lot, you know, more people getting help that they need, and a lot less tragedies and things that we see, and not just because of people committing them with mental health. When I first started learning about it, I was told one of the statistics that I had been taught was that there are more people with mental health that are victims of crimes, especially hate crimes, than there are with people that commit those kind of crimes. They have mental health. And so, you know,
Mhm.
they like to turn numbers on us. So we really need to just, you know, start working together, start being more open, being more honest. And, you know, a lot of it, I think, too, starts at home, you know, and how our older generation, you know, said, well, we'll just keep it quiet. We'll handle it the way we are. We don't talk about things, get put under the rug. And I know a lot of people in my family are still like that. There's a lot of people in my family that have mental health. And I said, no, I have to end that cycle. I have to, for myself, you know, be open about it. And, you know, and I've always let people know who come to my channel, if you ever need help with just hitting, or need someone just to talk to, a fellow peer, because a big part of the peer movement, being peer advocate. I love how you said the word advocate.
Mhm.
Um, letting people know that if you need help finding a peer advocacy, or if you need, you know, the help of finding a number, just let me know. Everybody knows on YouTube, when I start out, when I talk about this, I'm not a professional, I'm not a licensed doctor, but I am a peer, and I can help guide people to phone numbers and whatnot if they are interested. So I try to be that, kind of like that lifeline for when I wish I had somebody that could have been like that for me.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. And thank you very much, Heather, for saying that. Uh, you know, that's pretty much what my motto has been, and I guess what fueled to even getting me to start this channel. You know, that isolation and that feeling of abandonment and not wanting others to have to, you know, feel alone and suffer the way that I did. So, you know, you just really confirmed that too, in what you just said. And so thank you. And there's something else that I just that you had touched on, but I jotted down because I rather than, you know, I want to hear from everybody first before, you know, going down another rabbit hole. So yeah, but you talked about, you know, jobs and, you know, the stigma and how that holds with the support and why, you know, but anyways, let Tom.
Yeah.
There's so, I mean, it's, we could spend hours and hours on like any one of these. Yeah, I
Yes.
think so. What's so fascinating as I was listening to both of you and your perspective from working in the medical field is those numbers are always conservative, right? Because of underreporting and stigma, but also there are people who realize they have struggles with mental health because something triggered them, and then there are folks who've just always had them and
Right.
don't realize that there's anything that's malfunctioning, right? Just to use a messy word. Both my parents have anxiety and depression. All of my siblings do. You know, it was normal when I was a kid to sort of leave a vacation, or like we didn't have money for vacation, but it'd be like a weekend in Vermont, right? You know, we would have to leave early because one of my parents was having a mental health struggle, you know, a panic attack. So, you know, there's those folks who are just used to it, you know? And so they don't even know that there's a meme I see every once in a while that's like, "Oh, my doctor asked how I was doing." And I said, "Well, you know, I'm really sad and depressed and I'm anxious all the time, but isn't everybody?" And the doctor was like, "No." You know what I mean?
Right.
Oh,
Right. Oh,
oh,
yeah.
oh,
Mhm.
there are people who are okay sometimes, you know what I mean? So for me, like, and for me, it was realizing that when I was in my 20s, I wound up in the emergency room with what I thought was a heart attack, turned out to be a panic attack. And then I started getting treatment. And I was the first person in my family to do that. And once my parents and siblings kind of saw, oh, like, because I'm the weird one. I'm Aquarius rising, right? I'm the weird one in my
Me
family.
too. Yay.
Oh yeah.
You're Aquarius
um,
I was
now,
always the weird
so
one too. Mhm.
oh nice.
so
So
that
I'm always the
and maybe that's also why you guys are here, because you're the Aquarius rising in the age of Aquarius.
We
That's
yes.
are
why you're
the
meant to
weirdos.
stand out right now.
I think that's
Mhm.
true. I've been leaning into the Aquarius as I get older. I feel more Aquarian or more comfortable being Aquarian.
Hell yeah.
My dad was going through this when he was younger. He went to the hospital, but he went to a Catholic hospital and they said, just pray.
Oh boy.
So again, my dad learned that there wasn't anything wrong with him either, right? So,
Mhm.
and again, I'm using very general language. Like there's
Yes.
nothing wrong with you if
No.
you
Mm-mm.
experience these things. It's a neurodivergence, just like ADHD, which I also have, right? So when I say wrong, I'm just sort of speaking colloquially, right? Like I don't think that there's
Mhm.
anything wrong.
Mhm.
We, you know, you're if it's so familiar and if your family struggles with it and if it's there, you know, you have to sort of see somehow that there is another route. And that's one reason why I do talk about this stuff, even at work, you know, because I'm a trainer and I work in adult learning and I don't actively train anymore, but I would talk about or even just make little jokes about my anxiety and whatnot. And after class, I would find a lot of straight cis men would pull me aside and say, "Hey, thank you for talking about that because I had no idea that other people feel that way, and that's the thing that other people experience. And now I know there's something that I can explore, right?" So, like I learned early on, like that being vulnerable and being comfortable sort of sharing this stuff
Mhm.
Yeah.
is destigmatizing, and it also indicates and to folks who maybe don't have access to or aren't thinking the way, you know, like therapy language is so common now, you know, and there are populations of folks who, you know, are really, you know, queer people, women, people of color, right? I mean, like these are all people who are like, I need therapy because this world is nuts.
Mhm.
If every cisgendered straight man got themselves into therapy, everything would change. You know what I mean? So even if you don't think you need treatment,
Yeah.
Well,
explore
we
the
all have mental health, yeah, at
right.
different forms.
Yeah,
There's
that's
a quote
right.
that says we're all going to be disabled at some point in our lives if we're not now. And the same thing with mental health, you know.
It's funny. It's funny that you say that because I remember, bef- part of with my journey and leading up to, I used to work with clients that have brain injuries, and I used to take clients out and stuff like that to different places. And I remember an incident going to I think we went for lunch at a restaurant. I can't remember the restaurant right now, but they needed to go to the bathroom, and I took them, and it was because as the support worker, right, and it was a male client. Now I'm in a male bathroom to help a male client.
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with that. But then there were some other people that had to come in. Of course, they're able-bodied, and then they see that I'm there, and they're making it into something that, like, it absolutely. And I looked at that, and I'm thinking, and of course, my client is laughing, but my client is laughing because mentally he doesn't really know better. That's just right. And I'm looking at them, and I'm saying, everyone is just one situation away from being in another's shoes. So
That's right.
maybe you should think about that before you start whatever it is that you're doing.
Mhm.
I'm seeing people walk
Yeah.
away from me so fast. I was like, and then I was so angry, right? And I was like, oh, like I was fuming. So I helped the client, and then wheeled them back out. And then I was like, "Where's the manager?" And I was like, because I'm like, just that's ridiculous. Like, like respect. Like, it's just seriously.
Yeah.
So yeah, like we're all connected, and we're just exactly what Tom said. So yeah, like, and
When
this
you're
is
in
why we're
a
doing this.
Yeah, when we're in a caregiver role, we really do take on like that mama bear role, right? Like, don't mess with my patients, don't mess with my clients, my students, whatever you're serving. And yeah, so one of my first jobs was actually working with in a home with TBIs, traumatic brain injuries. And you're right, we would take these individuals out on outings, like like normal people do, just go out and do whatever. And out in society, it was a real, I was very young when I started that job. It was kind of like the beginning of my medical career. And it really opened my eyes, like you're saying, to people who treated these individuals like really differently. And I would go home sometimes and just cry because I'm like, how can people be so mean? How can people be so cruel out here to, like, these are human beings. Like, what are we doing? So, I mean, to say that I put people in their place a few times in my career would be an understatement, because I thought that's part of the job. That is, I'm sorry, but that's part of the job, is educating other people. Like, no, you don't get to treat people like that out here. Everybody out here is just as deserving of, like, using a washroom or whatever facility, or going places that anybody else is. So that's thanks for pointing that out, Ellen. It's very important, and hopefully, maybe somebody watching this will remember that when they're out in society. Those people have, everybody has just as much of a right to be out and about than anybody else does. And I just want to touch on one more thing that was really cool, that Tom was mentioning about sort of these statistics. But there's so many people that are undiagnosed. Like he was saying, there's people that sort of blend into the background because they don't know any different. Like you said, they've always just known what they live with, and they didn't know there's a name for it, or diagnosis for it, or even a treatment to it. So that's really important to point out as well, because as important as statistics are, mm, those are people who are actually diagnosed, and there's so many more that are not, and that never will be, because again, they either don't want to admit that they have something wrong with them, or they don't know that that is even a thing, and they just sort of carry on with what they've always known to be their norm, right? So yeah.
So taking some piggy steps off of Tom and you, Angela, this leads into the second part of the statistics, actually.
Okay.
So what so I stopped at the number that one in the UK it's 1 in 7, but according to WHO, which is of course the World Health Organization, not who as in who said
Right.
that.
Or the band, the Who.
Yeah.
Right.
Who are you?
Close to 2/3 of mental illnesses go untreated,
Mhm.
with many not even being diagnosed.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
2/3. So that's essentially basically exactly what you guys were just saying,
Yeah.
right? The majority. So there you go.
I have a
And
theory that, what we think of as neurodivergent is actually neurotypical. And what we
Mhm.
think of as neurotypical is really the divergence. It's just that
Mm.
the divergent the people who are now considered neurotypical are in charge of everything, right? They
Yes.
created
Mm.
streets and on ramp, so
Yeah.
everyone else has to say, hey, can we have a little ramp so that we could get up here too? You know
Yeah.
what I mean? When we think about like
Mhm.
how recent ramps and sidewalks are,
Oh my gosh.
or
it's terrifying.
even
So,
or even safety belts. So like
Mhm.
Trevor Noah, who's like one of like I love Trevor Noah and
I
his
know
like stand
Trevor
up,
Noah. Mm-hmm.
right? But
Yeah.
in one of his things he talks about like how the difference where the rest of the world we've had traffic lights for like since we've been born, we've known that there's been traffic lights, right? At least from where
Right.
we can be conscious of it to know. But like, and I think he was making the some joke where Africa being so far behind, where one day they just decided, oh, what are these things? Yeah, oh, traffic lights. Oh, they just add atmosphere because they don't really have any any particular usage, but it's the same thing where the law for seat belts, for example, right? Like I remember like my parents talking about back in the Caribbean and stuff like that, that uh, uh I think it was more up until recently where we've always had, like, for at least for a very long time, we've had what, a good 40 years or so, we've had seatbelt laws where that's more of a 20-year thing for them, right? And so it's like, huh?
Mhm.
But yeah, and then we have, for those that are diagnosed, 28% don't receive treatment
Mhm.
ever.
Mhm.
We
Yeah.
have from youths age 6 to 17 in Americans, it's 1 in 6, and 50% of all lifetime mental illnesses begin at age 14,
Hmm.
with 75% by age 24.
Hmm.
Mm. Wow.
Yeah.
And as we
Or a
we
little
we
later.
have already established and been talking, it's, think about it being much higher than that because, right,
Right.
it's the underreporting and everything, right? So
Mhm.
but yeah, like, if
Mm.
that's not something, because I know when I started I was like, and then there was I had to like take a deep breath because there was a part of me that wanted to start crying at all of this, because I'm like,
Mm.
no wonder why we're in a global mental health crisis. Look at what we've had to endure, so, as individuals, but as well as communities and societally, what
Yeah.
we've had to endure, humanity has had to endure in the last several years. And then combining that with generational trauma and the cycles that continue to repeat, lifetime after lifetime.
Mhm.
Because I think one point I bring up is when COVID struck, and and we're stuck inside, and there was and of course I was binge watching a lot of YouTube and stuff like that, and I guess that's also where I come to meet all of you guys too, around that time. And so but I was also watching other things, like, that would pop up, and there was a video where someone was comparing the Spanish flu and how and everything that transpired around like how they handled it, how society was, the response, things like that. You know, how they responded, and then comparing it to COVID and even the length of time that, we were going through. And I'm like, why does this look, it's it's the same scenario. It's just different actors. It's the same story. But it's different players, right? And even generationally speaking, based on technology, because back then it was this Spanish flu, and then of course there's the history on how it even got its name in the first place, which that's a whole nother thing, rabbit hole to dive into. But like,
Yeah.
right, but the response of the government to how they shut down, like, functioning, to the forcing of wearing masks, where we had laws and things like that, and they wanted to fine us and whatever, and all that kind of stuff. But back then, and also, now if you want to throw in, discrimination and oppression and, culturally speaking, whatever. But if you were a person during the time of the Spanish flu and you were caught without a mask on, and of course their masks were like cloth masks, whatever, back then, they would shoot you dead in the street or jail you. Those were your options. Right? Like, so, I mean, yeah, okay, maybe not, it's not quite as violent, but it's still technically sort of the same thing. And so my thought was, wait a second, but if technically worldly, we've already gone through this during that time, and didn't we not learn what happened to documents of people? Like, isn't that why we write books and we write things and we document things? Why wasn't there a contingency plan put in place already for years, donkey years down the road in case this happens again? Why are we scrambling and don't know how to respond, and chaos had to ensue? It didn't make any sense. But then it's like, then I was like, don't forget, Alana, because Piggy had to come in and put her 2 cents in. And she's got to, like, don't forget that a lot of those people probably corrupt and died. And then, so, fires happen. So documents get lost. So then people don't remember. Remember, it's different players. So the people that were alive then are definitely not alive now. So then there was a lot of things that I was trying to, like, now talk myself into, trying to logistically make sense of it all, right? But yeah, like, consciousness. It's all about the consciousness and the understanding, and how that sort of gets lost. But yeah, but even just like, what are your thoughts on the rest of that? Because that was really just confirming basically everything that we were already discussing, and that stemmed from Tom and Angela, like right, like, this is crazy.
All my synapses are firing as
I know.
Yeah.
My tongue is bleeding, I
For
think.
me, COVID
Yeah.
was actually, I enjoyed COVID shutdown. I am a person who is very comfortable at being at home. I had, where I live, I was able to go to the park. And it was nice to be able to drive and not have to worry about all the crazy people driving on. And when I say crazy people, let me reframe that. But the people who, because since cell phones and everything, people, a lot of road rage, a lot of, phone use, it was so nice to be able to drive in peace, go for drives into the country, go to the store. It was annoying to wear the mask, yeah, but to just be able to go see nature coming back out, seeing animals coming back out. For me, it was, we had my groups, we had telehealth, we had Zoom, and I miss groups, but at the same time, it was nice to be able to meet more people through Zoom and telehealth. And for me, again, the COVID was, it wasn't difficult at all for me. I know it was probably very difficult for some people in different households that had to deal with, trauma and PTSD and possibly, domestic violence and whatnot. But for me, it was just kind of like a breath of fresh air. And one of the things that I really got more involved in was I went to school for art. I have a degree in fine arts through Buffalo State. And for me, it was painting. And so I started watching a lot of art videos. I started getting inspired. My art took off. I explored more, and just before COVID hit, I was able to use that to, volunteer and help at the hospital and try to do some women art groups for anybody who want to come for an hour just to do collage or to just doodle or to color. And so for me, that time off was just very eye-opening to where showing me what my passions were, what could be in the future. And so and yeah, I kind of, did that whole thing where everyone was like, "Oh, look at this deck. Oh, I gotta get that deck too."
Yeah.
That's admit a lot of us, kind of, spent to kind of fill that void a little bit. But for me, it was eye opening. I met YouTube. I met fellow readers. Ange and I have known each other for as long as I know I've had my channel, and so her and I were in the original circle when we met, and so it's just it caused a lot of damage, a lot of sadness, and a lot of pain, but it also brought people together.
Yeah.
It's
In a
it's
very unique way,
it's
if
how
you
you
will.
it's how you look at it. And I found, when people would say, well, I'm mentally ill, I'm sick, and I'm just like, it's a challenge. It's not necessarily an illness. It's we all have some form of mental health. And for me, I'm a big proponent about using creativity to help with moments like that. I don't try not to go off topic too much, but that opened up and showed me, that how important music, the arts, writing, journaling, junk journaling, scrapbooking really can help someone with their mental health, help them through whether it's a strong mental health diagnosis or if it's a light one. It's still something that I think it gave a chance for people to come together and learn about things about themselves. People decided, hey, listen, I don't want to go back to work. I saw what it was doing to me physically, mentally, emotionally. I want something different. So I think it had a point to be there. There was a reason to have it. And not always saying it was, the best intentions of how it came around, but at the same time, not wanting to focus on that, but just looking at the what was going on and the aftermath and how much that has really inspired people to follow their passion more, to seek mental health assistance more, and to explore themselves and their creativity and other ways of being compassionate and kind to one another. Even though sometimes we, especially here in the States, we really don't think we see it because of the climate right now. It really has helped. Small, but it is helping. It's that ripple effect. It really is. And I think the
I
more we
wonder
talk
too. I think.
about
It's
Oh, I
it's
was,
it's almost like a purge, if you will, right?
yeah,
I
I like
guess like, a purge for us to really uncover the darkness and the destruction. Sometimes it takes destruction to combat destruction, if you will, to be able to build anew. So and it's, yes, we all suffer, in different ways, throughout that, but once you get yourself and can find your way through the darkness,
mhm.
there's definitely, you know, light at the end of that tunnel when you eventually get there. But it's having to get through all of that before. But uh, um, Heather, I was about to call you Zoom user.
I know. I didn't know if that was my mistake. I'm so sorry. I didn't see an option to
I
type
just
my
happened
name
to
in.
glance down, and right when I was about to call your name, I heard Zoom. I'm like, no, that's not it.
Oh,
Anyways,
you got boogers in
you
your nose.
mentioned you talked about and you just talked about it again actually, about the job and stuff like that. And and it's sort of bouncing off again, like even and what you were saying earlier about being in the healthcare field, and why, like, you and I have been in service to the community, and being an advocate for people, but also seeing where there's that separation in the workplace, and that understanding that the people that are also giving the service are also people too. We're not robots. And the lack of understanding, because of the concern being the bottom line, the concern being right, the fuel for funding, or the fuel for money that overrides the consideration of the health of a person, where that is concerned. And my with along my journey also include burnout from my field, working with clients, and that where the focus is on the well-being of others, and their whole well-being and health and wellness, and yet we're not considering that the people who are providing the care and what their wellness, and instead of giving the support, you just leave them to fend for themselves, and then when they break, they'll become a liability, and that's it. Like, there's no sense of understanding, empathy.
Girl, we could make a whole show on this topic alone. But
so so speaking about that, and how because now, like, we've sort of began talking about the individual self, but now sort of leading into the idea of outside of the micro to like the meso, the community aspect, right? Where all of this health and mental health and wellness and awareness is concerned. So yeah, like anybody who wants to I think, and you started, so
well, I think Tom's been trying to say a couple things, so I'd like to hear. Is that cool? Do you have something to add? No, you're good.
I always have something to say. I'm happy to hear what you got.
I just don't want to, because I know these type of things, we're all like, because I'm like writing things down over here. I'm like, I'm gonna forget. So okay, so to circle back around though really quick to the topic of who's gonna care for the caregiver.
Yeah, right.
I have a lot of thoughts on that, but just to keep it brief, I want to share a story where like I said, I was just diagnosed in June. And I think when you talk about those statistics and how many people are like untreated, I mean, there's various reasons why somebody wouldn't be treated, of course. Either they don't want to, or they don't know they need it, or whatever. But I really do feel like the beginning of it is having the right support in place in terms of like your healthcare professional, which is a big problem out here, because there's a lot of people, at least I'm speaking for here in Canada, it is a crisis that people don't have a family doctor. They don't have a doctor of any kind. They don't even have any kind of support. So they are sort of forced into going to the hospital, which is not what it's not really supposed to do. But now they're in a crisis, so now they have to have support. So now they're in the emergency room, which is not an ideal place to go receive your mental health treatment or help. Anyway, so what I'm going to share is that I'm very, very fortunate to have a very good doctor. And I was very nervous actually to go to her, because I really did have that sort of stigma label on me of like, but I should know better. Like, I'm a healthcare professional. Like, how is she going to view me? And I thought, why am I even having this thought? Like, that's ridiculous. I need help. She's a doctor. Let's just go get the help that you need, But it's weird how we think these ways. So anyways, when I sat down and I just, of course, just started bawling my eyes out and sharing everything, she just sat there, listened to me, of course. And then, all these follow-up appointments, I would say about the fourth follow-up appointment in, she said to me, okay, I need, now that I'm stable enough to have this conversation, I want to share something with you. I'm like, cool. She says there was recently a survey put out to patients in Ontario, Canada, and it said if you knew that your primary caregiver, your doctor, was diagnosed with a mental illness of any kind in this, and then they listed like depression, like whatever, a whole bunch of them, would you still go to that doctor? And do you know, like an alarming amount of people, okay, like 78% of people said no. And the survey said that the doctor would be properly treated. So you're not going to somebody who's unstable and not able to practice in their profession, like they are being treated themselves.
Mhm.
But it does tie back into what you're saying about like, well, wait a minute though. Okay, yes, she's a doctor, but she's a human being, just like anybody else. And if anything, she probably would be the most prone to such a thing from all of the exposure to everything that she's dealing with. And so I just, first of all, I thanked her for even sharing that with me, that she didn't have to do that. And she trusted me with that information. And I thought, wow, okay. And it made me feel so much better because I opened up and explained to her about how I don't know why, but I had this strange guilt hanging over my head that I'm a healthcare professional and now I have depression. And she's like, why are you feeling guilty about it? And so we had that conversation and she's like, okay, but you're human too. And because of all of your exposure to everything you've seen in this line of work, and then we had that conversation about what we see in this line of work. She's like, it's no wonder why. She goes, do you know most of the people, my patients that I serve are, yeah, in some form in the medical field serving in some way. And of course we're burnt out, we're stressed out, and it goes back to who's going to care for the caregiver. So yeah, I just put that out there so that people who are dealing with, their healthcare providers, please keep that in mind as well. That we can only do so much and we can only be pushed to our limits. So that's that. So, and I just want to touch really quickly back to what you were saying about the COVID thing. I definitely don't want to get on that topic because I have very different opinions than maybe most, and I don't want to make this into a controversial topic, but I will say that I've seen a lot behind closed doors during that, and let's just say let's just focus on the loneliness aspect of COVID, because that's what I wanted to go into here. COVID forced people to slow down, which I don't think was a bad thing, because everybody's like, blah, 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 and all of a sudden, boom, okay, you can't go anywhere, you can't do anything, you can't, like, what are we supposed to do? So I think in that respect, it was a good thing that it actually forced people to slow down to be like, well, who am I and what do I want to do and what am I doing here?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
It really did invite that. However, it's a double-edged sword because on the other edge of that sword, we already have loneliness as an epidemic, and it really, really is, especially here in North America. I can't speak for other countries, but so it really forced the people who were isolated and lonely to become more isolated and lonely, and so there was a lot of different connections that were made during COVID, yes, but then it also exacerbated some of the other issues that were already
Existing.
going on, right? And so yeah, it just that again, that's a whole topic that I don't want to get into, but I just wanted to focus on the mental health aspect side of things, how it really did exacerbate a lot for a lot of people, but it also brought other people together that wouldn't have otherwise. So it's kind of
And that's where I said where I used the term purge, right? Because like I knew like it's a very much that double-edged sword, but it also brought to light things that were already problematic.
yes.
And unless if without the heightened awareness or the in your face look at this, it just continues, right? So so it triggered. And even I use the term, and that's a whole nother topic, where the term the fall of Pharaoh,
Mm.
right? And where and the fact that last year was considered to be a karmic year, so whatever we put out on the flip side, and that's why things like shadow work and and addressing these things is important, right? Because and breaking certain patterns of behavior and really taking you know, bringing the awareness to it, and shedding the light on it. Sometimes the darkness has to come in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's what I meant. But I meant, but yeah, like it's very much that double-edged sword, and there was a lot of terrible things that came through, but it also brought forth awareness to things that
That's right.
weren't there before.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
Yeah.
so but yeah, and anybody else with opinion on like job, and you know, and you know, that sort of mezzo aspect of looking at mental health and the effects of it?
There's so much I like. I've been taking notes in my mind that
Yeah. Yeah.
I was someone for whom the lockdown was not healthy. And, you know, I'll say thanks mostly to problems I was having at work. I was drinking a lot, you know what I mean? And like, I never really a big issue for me, but you know, I think I got to a point where I said, I either have to stop drinking or I'm gonna turn into gin. You know, and so I would say during that moment, my mental health was probably about as worse as the worst that it's been in my adulthood anyway. I had to double my medication for anxiety. And I do think we're a like we forget that like human beings are animals. And so like as I've been listening, I keep getting like, oh, poop, we're an animal, poop, we're an animal. Like, so much of it is like we go through something unimaginable, and then we look back and say, oh, it was for the best, right? And that's such a human thing, because we have to do that. Like we have to
The
make it make
deflection.
sense. You know,
Adaptability. Yeah.
Yeah,
all
we're
we
deflecting.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're all just trying to make stuff that does not make sense.
Yeah.
And that when we can't do that is usually one reason why mental health moments trigger, right? Like we come to a moment where all of our tactics, all of the like coping mechanisms that we've learned just drop out on us, and that's usually the moment where we end up getting help, you know what I mean, if we do make that choice. So it's such a complicated thing being a human being, because we are like very now, like we talk about mindfulness and we say people, we don't live in the moment, but actually we're so motivated by the moment and so not motivated by the future.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Elena, to go back to your thing of like, why didn't we learn from the last time? Because we knew all that. Because we don't think like we did that. We did the pandemic. We had that flu. That's never going to happen again. We learned, you know what I mean? So we're so short-sighted. But
Yes.
most of us are like simultaneously terrified of, you know, not very realistic, not very dangerous things, at the same time as being like backward projecting to all the dumb shit we've ever done and said,
Right.
you
Right.
know? And so like being a human is a really, really difficult experience. And so I
Yeah.
guess like to like kind of even summarize all of the, like if you have access to counseling, try it. You know what I mean?
Oh my
Um,
goodness, yes.
yeah, like we mythologize Canadian healthcare in the States, and every Canadian I've ever talked to are like, look, you know, there's stuff about it that just didn't work. But
Yeah.
you know, but if you're in the United States and you have employee funded or employee sponsored health insurance, you probably have an employee assistance program, which is likely going to give you like 6 or 7 no cost sessions with a counselor.
Mhm.
You're paying for it anyway. Like I work in corporate America as well as doing tarot. I tell my team at work all the time, use all your vacation and use every benefit that you get. Do not let yourself be paid less, because in the United States, your benefits are considered part of your compensation.
Yeah.
So if you're not using all your vacation time, if you're not using those 7 free sessions, you're getting paid less.
Mm-hmm.
So screw, you know,
So,
if no other reason than to say damn the man, go use those sessions. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
well, it
Mm-hmm.
just as you were
Absolutely.
saying that, I was making a face because no 6 or 7 sessions, not here in Canada.
No. Ugh.
And maybe it also depends too on, you know, who, you know, I guess your job and
Yeah,
the
it depends
coverage
where you
that you
work.
have,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
yeah.
But for me, in my experience, you know, the coverage was you know, psychology or whatever, it's a certain amount. And
Mhm.
based on what the rate of charge per session is, it really only translated to the allowance was really only maybe 2 to 2.5 sessions per
Yeah.
year, and that's it.
Yeah.
So
Well,
if you're really in a crisis,
it's
Yeah.
bad if you're in a crisis.
Well, yeah, if you're in a crisis, I
Mhm.
mean, you know, and that's the thing too. You know, we talk about treatment and things like that. You know, to go back to that, it's like, you know, if somebody's in a crisis, like, you know, a phone number could help, but in my, I mean, I don't want to generalize that, but okay, how do I say this? So there's many different avenues out here for support, but it's like finding the right one that fits you is crucial. And also when you're in the middle of a crisis or about to, you know, sort of finding that help is can exasperate your situation. And I'll use an
Yes.
example. So here I'm in Ontario, Canada as well, for anybody that doesn't know. And you know, I'm grateful. I am grateful for the healthcare that I do have here in this country. Is it perfect? No, it is not. But you know, I have access to healthcare. So there we go. Um, and one of my treatments that my doctor recommended was a program called Bounce Back. Bounce Back is a program. It's CBT based, and it's just what it sounds like. You're supposed to bounce back and get back to work and be your happy self again. Okay, so yeah, it sounds great, but
in theory,
Yeah.
and you know what though,
Positive.
and I'm not knocking. I mean, the program for me was like it. The person that I was hooked up with, and I guess this is where I'm trying to go with it. I'm sorry, my brain's going all these different ways. Is that the she wasn't a counselor. I forget what they call them. Intake coordinator. I don't know. This person that I was hooked up with that would call me every 2 or 3 weeks to check in. Did I do my workbook? You know, how are you feeling? What's going on? She wasn't into her job, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And luckily enough for me, I was stable enough each time I was talking to her that instead of going deeper down the hole of the depression, I used that opportunity to be like, all right, you know, how can I, you know, let her know like what she's doing is actually more harm than good, because there are no doubt people that are going to be going to the same individual that are in a much worse position than I am, that she's going to actually do more harm than good. And the first thing in the medical field is we do no harm. That is what we are not supposed to do. And so, you know, again, I came at it from that lens of the medical field going, oh my gosh, this lady has no idea that she's actually not helping.
Mm.
And I ended up eventually, you know, telling her I'm done. I'm done with these sessions and here's why. And I was very nice about it. I wasn't, you know, I was very professional about how I went to it. You know, and her thing was just like, "Oh, well, I'm sorry you feel that way. You know, I can hook you up with, you know, another, you know, individual." And I'm thinking, "Okay, you're missing the point." You know, instead of like taking that as an opportunity to reflect and be like, "Could you tell me more about it or could we talk about it or something?" And she just kind of, you know, assumed that it was just a personality conflict. And I thought, "Okay. All right, cool." But that's just why I'm mentioning that is because it is so important that if and when you do reach out for help, and if you don't connect with that person that's providing the treatment,
Mhm.
it's okay to fire them and get somebody else.
Yes.
It
yes,
doesn't mean that CBT didn't work for me. It means it didn't work for me coming from her and her deliverance of it,
Mhm.
which was quite rushed. You could tell she was working from home with the headset, and I could hear her doing the dishes. And, you know, you could, I was like, what is happening? Could you not just take and literally, we're on the phone for like 10 minutes. And at the beginning of the call would start with like the whole on the scale of 1 to 10, you know, how, you know, basically they want to see, did you improve from the last treatment? And she had she had absolutely zero empathy, zero compassion, and zero interest in the conversation itself. And so finding the right treatment, but also finding the right healthcare provider is half the battle. That's what I see out here. And I knew that prior to being diagnosed, but oh boy, after I was like, okay, so I definitely see why people just decide, no, I'm not doing this. This isn't working for me. It's like, oh no, don't take just one, person and think that that's CBT or that is whatever, counseling or whatever that you're going for, right? Like, I would definitely say take your time and find one that works for you. Just keep trying out there. And I will say that the bounce back program is covered here in Ontario. It was a treatment that was covered. And I'm sure it is a great program for those that can find the right fit for it. So there are supports out here, and I don't know why, but it seems like they're not that easy to find, and they should be. Something like this should be so readily available in your face. And I know, like, okay, the 1-800 numbers and the crisis lines, okay, but I've used those too, and I'm not saying that they don't have their place, but I'm saying that we could do better out here, yeah, with it, because I think that there's a lot of people that are turned off by it because they have tried to reach out and they didn't even get the help they need, not even remotely close.
Have a personal story where that's concerned. So
Yeah.
like, with those, that's, I was about to say psychic lines. No, I mean the crisis lines.
You probably get more help that way.
Yeah.
Hey.
Anyways, no, and one time, and I was, I was really emotional. I felt at that time I was definitely in crisis, and I, felt enough compelled that I needed to call. And I called, and I was trying to talk to the person. And why did friend fall asleep? Why am I hearing snoring on the phone?
God.
And then when I finally was like, hello, oh, sorry. I'm like, did you fall asleep? No, I just have a cold. No, you fell asleep. You were snoring. Like,
Oh no.
My God. That's awful.
I do want to highlight
I
Anne's
will
point
call
though.
now and laugh at it, but I wasn't laughing then, right? Like I was just like, wow, like seriously? So, like it really goes to say like about, the kinds of people too, and the quality and stuff like that. But,
Yeah.
and how, especially when you're already in crisis and you're already suffering mentally, how easily things like this, bad experiences can trigger you, and, that
Yes.
fear to not want to go back and try it again. Right. And I know from my own personal experience, the the trip that I had to take into this healing process of mine was a very long journey, and there were many trial and errors, and until I found the right sort of combination that worked for me. And that's where where also am very grateful to the introduction to tarot, and the path that has led me down. The sort of, as we talk about stigmas, right, and in the spiritual community, and the stigma that tarot has had for such a long time, and especially when we're looking at more into the, under the lens of fortune telling and things like that, it's really had this, this sort of negative view on it. Whereas, diving into further into my spirituality, and sort of, breaking that glass ceiling, if you will, to the restrictive sort of Christianity viewpoint, and really expanding myself to other religious practices, other spiritual practices outside of what I have known, including tarot and other forms of divination, has really led me into really getting my to know myself better, and the benefits that has been in combining that with therapy practices, with my regular therapy sessions that I have. And I guess for me, the advantage that I have, you know, the same as you, and is that, you know, I'm a mental health advocate, but I am, you know, a registered social worker, you know, here in Canada. And, you know, that
Mhm.
has been my profession, being a community advocate and things like that. So I have that education and that, you know, professional experience under my belt to be able to, I guess, find my own practice, if you will, in
Yep.
combination with what I've been doing personally in my own therapy sessions, and how I can, you know, combine that too. And that, and again, that sort of leads into why and how I started my channel, if you will. And then me leading up to finding you fabulous people, and, you know, and the other wonderful connections that I've made, you know, with Drea Bloom being one of them.
Yeah.
You know, most has been one of the most significant
Mhm.
connections, I would say, that I've had the opportunity of making, because um you know, Drea Bloom is a psychotherapist,
Mhm.
licensed psychotherapist in the States, wrote has written many books, you know, combining therapy practice, you know, and tarot. And, you know, and then of course, you know, getting to know her through this community, you know, and then finding, you know, the connection, like, you know, with Ange, who is so much of a fan of Drea's and has all her books, and being able to collaborate and talk about that. I've had Drea on my channel. She's also been on Ange's channel. So, you know,
Mhm.
it's such a wonderful staple and confirmation that this path of healing that I ventured down, it, if I didn't break, I wouldn't be here.
Mm.
So,
Right.
you know, it's, and that's what I'm saying, the double-edged sword, right, of you know, of when things happen, you know, it really brought to light the things that I was doing that weren't serving me, that was hindering me and hurting me. You know, I basically, before COVID, was, you know, thrown into isolation. Here, go. But the thing is, the problem is, I think um I also sort of prolonged maybe the process, if you will, because I wasn't listening, because I'm not giving. And then that people pleasing, you know, sort of way of coping. Yeah, I see you talk with the rolling of the eyes, but right, you get it. And and so I wasn't listening, so it was like God or whatever, the universe was like, I said stay in, take care of yourself, and you're not listening. And I just, so things just kept on happening because I, right. And it wasn't until I took that time to really dedicate myself to that deep dive, and, you know, committing to therapy and all of that, that, you know, finally I can say that I've reached a point where I'm seeing the light now. Not the light to, you know, for me to go back home, because, you know, even though sometimes I'm just like, this world is too crazy for me, I don't like it here. But, you know, I do, and then I'm grateful for the small reminders that it is worth being here, you know. And you guys are definitely one of those you know, well, several of those confirmations. So thank you. But yeah, like, you know, so, and now, as we, because, you know, we're all tarot lovers here, and this is part tarot channel too, so, you know, just bringing that back to how you guys work individually with tarot,
Mm.
and how that has been for you in,
Mm.
you know, yeah, in your practice, and your well-being, mental health, and even, you know, what you do to help others in the community. So yeah, anybody.
Okay,
I
yeah.
don't
So
know. Oh,
go ahead, Heather.
no, I was going to say, I kind of mentioned that in the beginning, just, you know, making sure my space, my chats are a safe space that people can openly share. I'm very authentic and open and transparent as possible. And you know, the readings I give, I try not to, you know, make sure that they're not all, you know, fluffy and full. I'm full of light. I mean, there are going to be times when we do need to look at, what's coming up in them, and I think that we can use them as kind of guideposts, using the images and how they relate to us, and just like, and you had, I think, and just in the beginning, empowering people, to help themselves to find their self-worth, and it's like you can't do it for them, they have to do the work. But I think that the tarot, the oracle, whatever divination that you use, is a spiritual tool that can be used as a coping, as a tool, not an end all be all. For me, I know that some people have shared in my chat that they're afraid to get help again for the stigma, but also there is this issue, and I'm not gonna go down too far because that's another topic for a show. But there's an issue too in the mental health community where um, people are kind of still divided about medication, and some people get shamed for taking medication. I take medication. I've cut down what I used to take, but you have to advocate for what is best for you. And for some
Yes.
people, like Ange, she doesn't want to take them. And I totally support her on that and her decision. For me, I need to take at least one to help me get through. You know, so we're all different. Again, we're not cookie cutter. And is having to be as respectful as possible to each other, because we all have different journeys, we all have different experiences. We're not all going to be the same. And I think the tarot is a way of bringing community together, like music, like art. I mean, it is art. You're looking at the art of the cards. And so it's a beneficial tool. And I'll leave it at that.
I used to really separate, and I worked really hard to kind of separate psychology and spirituality from tarot for myself, because I'm not a psychologist, I'm not a therapist. Spirituality, I also grew up Catholic and had a very close relationship
Me
to
too.
it. I didn't grow up spicy Catholic. I grew up like white, plain white rice Catholic. You know what I mean? No magic. Um, and so, but as a queer person, it really did a lot of damage to me. As I'm getting older, I'm sort of bringing it back, but I do think of myself as a fortune teller, in the kind of work that I do. And I feel like it's important for me to be honest with that about my clients, because I don't have a credential of counseling. So, if I'm going to address health in a reading, which I might, I need to contextualize it as I'm a fortune teller. I'm not a doctor. But what I've noticed too in the last couple of years is folks want more spirituality than they used to in their readings. Folks are asking to explore. I've had more people in this year ask me, I just want a reading to know if I'm cursed. Nobody's ever asked me that before this year. I probably had 4 or 5 within the
Yep.
span of like 2 months.
Wow.
And um and I think the last few years, I think the pandemic has changed. Whenever after the Civil War is when the U.S. Civil War is when spiritualism, right, became large. Like Mary Todd Lincoln was having seances in the White House, and it was because so many people it was just mass death, right? And we just went through that. So I think it makes sense, and I think in the next few years, there's going to be more requests for like mediumship, right? Because people are going to think about that ancestor who passed during lockdown. And I think people want to engage with that stuff. And the reason I'm sort of bringing spirituality into the equation right now is because I've also learned in exploring the world and exploring all the things that like Catholicism hid from me, that through most of history, spirituality and medicine and science, like they were not separate. You would go to a diviner to find out what was wrong, and then that diviner would then come up with a cocktail of herbs or whatever and practices to heal you, right? There was remediation. And I wonder, again, just because of the world the way it is, we were just talking about access. Like I said, hey, go use your 7 free sessions. At the same time, we have wait lists in the United States to see it, right? So don't do it if you don't need it, but like, explore it. will there be more integration of spiritual counseling because there's nothing else, right? There's not access to anything else.
Right.
And maybe as readers, we need to then sort of up our education or our credentialing, not to necessarily replace therapists or psychotherapy, right? But to supplement and to
Yeah.
And
offer,
our ethics.
yes, a
Mm-hmm.
spiritual support that's not dogmatic and that's not tied to a particular path.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where my path seems to be taking me as a reader.
Mm-hmm.
And
That's a
that's kind
beautiful
of where
thing.
I see things like to what from what I'm learning. Medical, the science aspect and spirituality
Mm.
are technically not separate. They work cohesively with each other.
Yeah.
And the fact that, we spent a long time, historically separating the two. And then we have Scientology over here, we have Muslims over here, we have
Mhm.
Hindu over here, we have this over there, Catholicism, yada, 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 you name it. When you translate it all and come back to the
Going back
one,
to source. Yeah.
it's one,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
but along the way, trauma, our different personalities and perspectives and the journeys that we take, sort of, generationally, sort of take a different route, and we all somehow ended up,
Mhm.
divided, if you will. And that's why we have all
Mhm.
these different divination
Mhm.
practices, because we've all divided,
Mhm.
if you will, right? But it's really one and the same, if to a certain degree. But there's also the balance and stuff. There's the yin and yang of everything, the opposing, right? But in order to have the opposing, it still has to come from one full whole first. So,
Right.
and yeah, so, but and your thoughts on, like the combination of tarot and stuff.
Yeah. So, when I first when I first started off with cards, it was Doreen Virtue. I mean, you can come for me if you want, that's okay. But
They were
that's
pretty
how,
My
good.
own thoughts on that whole mess, but yeah.
I mean,
They were pretty.
right, right. And I still own every deck and I still like them and I still use them actually. But the point though is that, I came to this sort of uh yeah, like through the angelic realm, if you will. And yes, I was born and raised Catholic, and so it's just neat to know how we all came to it. And I started off with the oracle cards, and then my first tarot deck was through her. But of course, like, I definitely would not recommend a Doreen Virtue tarot deck to be your first, but that's just my opinion, because everything's going to be glazed over with that sweetness.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. But I I have come so far
Anything
with
wrong with the
um
sweetness? The sweetness is still valid, but
it
too
is.
much of that can be very diabetic. Yeah, like,
Well, I mean, and the way she packaged it was to say, "Oh, we've eliminated all of the bad stuff. It's only good." It's like, girl, please. That is not how we should be approaching this topic when we're dealing
Mhm.
with light and shadow, and come on.
yes.
Um, but anyway, yeah, I've come a long way with where I want to go with my practice. At first, it was just a personal practice, like I said, and then I
Mhm.
realized there was like this whole rabbit hole. So then I discovered, like Kellyanne Maddox out here, and Katie Flowers and Tom Benjamin, and all these people. And I was like, whoa, there's like a whole world out here, and I just loved the different perspectives on it and where you could go. I mean, literally, tarot is a tool that is it's an endless rabbit hole of information, of support, of whatever you want it to be. It's just packaged differently depending on what reader you go to. Some people use it as frivolous and fun and fortune telling, and that's cool.
Mhm.
But for me, it's a deeper tool, and I've come to learn it in that way
Mhm.
and to respect it in that way, that it shouldn't be just sort of fooled around with. It's actually, like, these are people's lives. Like, people are coming to you with some pretty vulnerable stuff, and you need to take it seriously. And also, and I just had this whole panel on tarot ethics and what that means and what that looks like. And I I say that if people really want to take this seriously and do it professionally, you really need to check your ethics of what that means to you, what your intentions are, why you're doing it, and you know, really get some knowledge around the topic and what it can do for you in terms of that support. So for me, particularly because I've now exited the medical field, all of that nerdiness, love for the medical field of anatomy, physiology, and things like and science, I'm incorporating that now into my readings. And so there is this mind, body, soul connection, treating the whole person. The connections that I'm making right now between tarot and the actual human body and the different organs and everything, it's really fascinating. And so that is where I'm at right now on my journey with it. I haven't even began to deliver any of this information on my channel yet, but I will. So it just kind of comes full circle to what we're talking about with the, uh, you know, you're led on your path for a specific reason. Yes, you know, I was in the medical field for all those years, but I had to be to become what I am now with all that knowledge. And so yeah, tarot, again, like I said at the beginning, I use it for self-exploration, self-expression, and personal growth. But I also use it to empower others and to really give them that sort of framework to work with. And for me, ethically, it's so important when I give readings to let people know that, you know, it's in their hands. You know, here's the energy around the situation, and now it's up to you to do the work. And doing the work is something I hammer home every time that I give a reading. You know what I mean? It's so important that people understand that, you know, what I'm about to tell you definitely can change. You know, there's free will and that sort of thing. But tarot is a very, very powerful tool if you want to utilize it in that way. And if not, you just want to have fun with it and pull it, like, you know, at a party or something like that, that's cool too. But you know, tarot, you know, like for example, the tarot movie that recently came out. Oh, bom bom bom. No, there's like this whole stigma around it because we keep putting crappy movies like that out there. You know, it's just like, no, it's so much more than that. Stop. But you know, and then I believe somebody here on panel had mentioned too about you know, being raised with the thought that tarot was like taboo and scary and evil and you shouldn't do it. That
Yeah,
whole
that
thing
was,
too, right?
yeah, like and
Yeah.
it's still very much a stigma, which is why I say I find myself, you know, stuck in this void because, you know, I still very much hang on to my Christian beliefs to, you know, certain degree and whatever,
Yeah.
and certain teachings and
Mhm.
stuff like that, you know, the upholding, you know, light and love and integrity and all of those things, but also, you know, still having that curiosity of awareness of, you know, sight unseen and things like that. And to me, and I
Yeah.
think because of my experience sort of working in a Christian bookstore and, you know, and seeing some of the worst people upholding, oh, Christian base, blah blah blah, God is love, but they're just some of the most darkest evil
Yeah.
people you can ever meet in your life, backstabbing. And I'm like,
Mhm.
listen,
Mhm.
it is not the practice, it is the will of the person. A
Mhm.
knife is just as it is. It only becomes a weapon when the in person who with the intent to wield it as such. And
That's
that
right.
can be said about tarot, that can be said about the Bible, that can be said about absolutely anything
That's right.
within the spiritual world or that is considered to be that. Or
Yeah,
anything in that matter. A pencil can be a weapon, but
that's
we
right.
use it for writing and we use it for drawing. A knife we use to cook
Mhm.
and to prepare meals with, but you can also kill somebody with it.
Right.
So,
It's intention. Yeah, it all comes here to your intention for sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? So this stigma,
Mm-hmm.
the stigma on all these things needs to go. It
Yeah.
just it needs to go.
And stigma's there by design. So, like, if you're a person who's a rebel, like, recognize that if you're worried about stigma, the most rebellious thing you can do is screw it because it was put there
Yep.
in pop culture to keep you feeling that way.
That's right. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it even comes down to this, you know, the whole idea of, oh, you know, oppression. And even our perspectives, like, you know, we all have our different journeys and everything sort of falls into that, right? Our upbringings, our cultures, and, you know, and the sort of generational sort of cycles that has continued throughout lifetimes. You know, we even when we talk, you know, looking at society, not even just race, but class, and, you know, and the privilege, if you would say, you know, right? Because we all have come from different walks of life, and regardless of race, we can be in whatever societal, you know, financial category, or whatever. And depending on your job, do you have coverage to even get healthcare, or to even get the coverage for medical, or for mental health and support? It's, you know, some people's perspectives could be like, oh yeah, it's accessible, yeah, there's lots of programs out there. And depending on where you are, even, you know, geographically, it may
Yeah.
not really exist for you.
Right.
So, you know, it's also, you know, being open-minded and mindful of that, and having that sense of checking your privilege, you know, when it comes to, you know, things, when we judge other people, and, you know, when we, you know, how we sort of view things, you know, and the differences between us. Like, to me, you know, when it comes to connectivity and understanding, you know, and oneness, it's like, yes, I respect the individual, and accepting of who anybody and everybody is. I don't always have to agree with your point of view on whatever particular topic, but that doesn't mean that I will treat you any differently. That doesn't mean that the respect and the love or the support that I would give you is going to be any different because we don't agree. We don't have to. That's the beauty of it all, right? We just have to recognize that we are human beings,
Right.
and we have, you know, this a mind just the same way that processes things differently. And that's that, right? You know, so when you know, when the friction really kills me to see, and like I said, you know, when talking about, you know, the stigma, and how you know, and you mentioned, you know, that survey that your doctor had done, right? And again, and forgetting that they're people too. We're all people. Doesn't matter if you're a lawyer, if you're the president, if you are, you know, a politician, or a doctor, or a police officer, or a bum living on the street. We are all human beings, and we deserve the same respect and understanding that we desire for ourselves. So,
Yeah. And you mentioned a really good point about access and privilege. Thank you for mentioning that because it's so important. Um, yeah, definitely. We we don't all have the same access and the same privilege. And as a white female, I will tell you obviously that I certainly have more privilege than most. However, I recognize that, and maybe even more so because of that, I have always stood for advocacy of you know, people of all types that should have access. And you know, and I have witnessed it too in my line of work of people being treated differently because of, you know, because of who they are, of this color of their skin, of their, oh yeah. So it definitely takes all kinds out here in terms of supporting. And I think it all comes down to just really, checking your privilege for sure, first and foremost. But also, being aware of, like you said, the fact that not everybody does have access out here and what that looks like. So, opening up and having these types of conversations really does maybe give people a different perspective and a different idea of where we're all coming off these different lenses out here. So, this has been a great topic, a great conversation. Thank you so much, Elena, for hosting this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for all of you being here. And as we're coming up to like 2 hours that we've been, chatting and stuff like that, you guys have, it's been wonderful, and like, just as I said, I don't really like planning per se, and whatever, and just sort of letting things, go organically. And so but beforehand, and I guess too, because I am a Virgo, and of course I'm like, well, what if something happens and we're silent and we don't know what to talk about next? So I need to have something,
Yeah.
like outlined or written. And then, it's funny because as we've been talking, and I've only looked at my page like maybe the first couple of times, and especially, talking about the statistics, but I realized throughout the entire conversation, we've bounced off of each other, and we've pretty much hit all the questions that I had written and outlined, just
Wonderful. Yes.
naturally speaking, right? So it's like, I was like, wow, I was like, wait a second, I was looking and I'm like, oh yeah, we talked about that. Oh yeah, we did talk about that. Oh yeah, and that too. Oh wow, well, look at that.
Well, being a Virgo myself, I messaged her behind the scenes. Is there anything I should prepare for? Like, are there any questions? Like, how is this going to be structured? And she's like, oh no, we're just going to go with it. And I'm like, oh, because I'm like, oh no.
It's like, grasped her pearls.
It's like, oh no, the Virgo in me is stirring. I don't know, but I mean, it's been great, and thank you,
Yes,
thank
it
you
has
again.
been.
Yeah.
Yes, it's been an honor.
And I guess I felt like I had enough confidence because of the fact that, I do, speak to you guys regularly outside of this, and I do follow your channels, and we're part of this community, if you will. And so we kind of have an idea on where our minds are at and our perspective. So because of that too, it naturally felt like, oh yeah, we'll flow just fine. And I'm like, and this is my 4th year doing this, and it's good. So I've loved it each and every time, and it's always with different people,
Yeah.
and had different creators, and a lot of them being a part of the tarot community, excuse me, and we touched on different topics, where even be psychology, or even shadow work, and what and depending on the year, depending on what it is that sort of comes up, that's what basically we talk about for the most part. And even though I may sort of have prepared questions beforehand, usually it flows its own way, and I love it for that reason, because to me it's as authentically presented as anything can be, because we're just speaking from our minds and our hearts, and that's really that's it. And and being authentic is the best thing you can do for yourself and for everyone around you. And I thank you so very much for lending the time and being a part of this. And of course I will have everyone's links down below, so you can get to know and check out their channels, because everyone has in this chat today has a channel, and have a very unique way of looking at things, as even though it's still very relatable, we all have our own sort of unique viewpoint, if you will, and experience, and things like that. And I absolutely love that. And even like I said, even if we don't agree, that doesn't mean that we can't still get along
Have a conversation. Yes.
and have a
Mhm.
conversation and be open and
Respectful.
honest and authentic with each other. So thank you from the bottom of my heart and from all the piggies that live there. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being a part of
you.
this.
Thank you for having me.
And
Mhm.
as I've always said, and yes, and Heather, for even showing your interest to being a part of this, because initially it was just going to be 3 of us, and then pretty much last minute, Ange contacted me and said that you had interest and wanted to join, and I was over the moon excited because I'm
Oh,
like,
thank
the
you.
more the merrier, and I absolutely love this. Other people that have the interest to talk about mental health and to break that stigma of everything that surrounds it, including spirituality, including divination, and just being human.
Yep.
Living that human experience and sharing that with other humans.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like I said, and as I always say, you know, I am love. And as I see myself as love, I see you too as love. And so if I can love myself, then I can love you.
Mm.
As you are
That's
human,
beautiful.
I am too. So as we leave, you know, this today, and everyone in chat, and of course this will be edited and premiered for Bell Let's Talk Day, which is actually Wednesday, so in 2 weeks exactly. Wednesday, January the 22nd, 2025. We are in a hermit year. We are in the year of the snake, shedding the old to clear up and bring fresh, new, and life and abundance for us all. So thank you. And until next time, I see you. Don't forget to love yourself and each other. Take care of yourself and hopefully me too. And don't forget to live, listen, and learn. I love you.
Yes.
Thank you so, so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.